Good morning. Nice to see you all today. Thanks for coming out. It is Ash Sunday. We always joke around, we're like too lazy to do Ash Wednesday. We got things to do on Wednesdays. We're already here on Sundays. As you can tell, I'm not a super religious person, so the idea that not doing it on Wednesday and doing it on Sunday like brings joy to my heart. Just to push against the grain a little bit. Well, if you are a guest this morning, if this is your first time here at Crossroads, maybe you're tuning in online for the first time or you're catching this on demand, thank you so much. My name is Ryan. I'm the lead pastor here at Crossroads Church. My pronouns are he, him. I am a white, cisgendered, heterosexual male born into a Christian home, middle class. This country was built, the laws were built, the Constitution was written for people who look like me, believe like me, love like me, and it has afforded me all kinds of privilege at the sake and at the expense of the oppression of many others. And part of following Jesus for me and for our church is to recognize that reality and to follow this peacemaking path of Jesus into wholeness for everyone. Philippians gives us this beautiful picture of this living Christ that took on flesh, dwelt among us, took on the role of a slave, a servant, gave up all privilege to bring life to all. And so that's what we're trying to do here. And so if you are a guest, that's a good understanding of just a little bit about what we're about, what I'm about. And that really is what we think the kingdom of God is all about, is bringing peace on earth, wholeness, fullness. It's not about some place you go to when you die, but it's about how do our lives right now contribute to that reality. One of my favorite scholars is known for saying things like, heaven's doing just fine, it's earth we should worry about. And so I live a very earthy faith. That's the idea. So I'm not too worried about life beyond this one because I know that God is love, and in love there's no fear. So all that is there. So great to have everybody here. This morning we're kind of beginning this new journey, and it's a Lenten series, this season of Lent, and we're calling it The Shape of Hope. And we're going to talk about hope for the next few weeks. Not hope as denial of reality. How many of y'all know people like that? They have so much privilege like me, they can live in denial, right? We can turn off the news. We can not worry about certain things because it's never going to affect our lives, right? But that's not what we're going to talk about, right? We're not going to talk about hope as this attitude of pretending everything is fine. But we're going to talk about hope as something that takes form, that takes shape, something that has texture and weight to it and presence in our lives. Because hope ultimately is not just something that we think about, right? Some of you that are talk notes people, you're like, man, he nailed that first talk note early. Sweet. I'm going to get out for brunch and not lunch. That's what you're thinking. Don't hold your breath. Sometimes we imagine hope as this thing that we think about, that comes into our minds, but hope is something we actually experience with our bodies. And that's really where we are today. And I think that's why this season within the life of our church of Lent doesn't begin with this big lecture on what Lent is all about. There's not a debate about whether or not Jesus was really born of a virgin or didn't know. But it starts with this embodied moment where we take ashes and we put them on skin, where we take our fake candles, because we don't want to burn the building down, and we turn them on, but we hold them in our hands, and we recognize that there's breath moving through our lungs. See, faith and hope, these aren't just ideas, right? They're things that we practice, and we practice them with our whole selves, right? We practice them with our whole selves. And many of us come into this Lent moment, this season where we launch, where we think for the next 40 days about our lives, where we think about our relationships, we think about the areas of our lives we want to see growth in, the area of our lives we might want to see transformed. But some of us, we enter, and a lot of us, I think, we enter into this season already carrying this kind of awareness in our bodies. We carry this idea that something feels disconnected, that we feel disconnected, maybe even a little disconnected from reality. Do you ever feel like you're kind of sitting there and maybe you're scrolling through your socials or you're watching the news or you're talking with somebody and you feel all of a sudden like disembodied from yourself and you're like, what is happening? Like, what am I hearing? How is this being said? Am I like living in an alternate world, an alternate reality? And we find ourselves kind of disconnected, our souls disconnected from our bodies, our souls in a sense longing for something that isn't present with us right now in this moment. And so some of us sit in this space and we know like there's just something disconnected. We feel a little disconnected maybe from our idea of God. We feel disconnected from the people around us. Like there's just a gap there, a chasm there. We're not sure why. Maybe we even feel a little disconnected from our own hearts. Maybe there are longings and desires that we once had that are no longer there. And that reality, that feeling of disconnectedness is why this moment matters, why this morning matters, why Lent matters. Because Lent really begins with this idea of imposition of ashes as a telling of the truth. It's a speaking of truth. It's a regrounding of ourselves into honesty, and it's meant to happen without shame. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily how it always happens, but it's meant to happen in a space that's free from shame. And it's interesting that the story of our faith tradition, right, the story that begins it all is a story that doesn't begin with rules, but it begins with breath. Right, if you're familiar with our kind of ancient creation mythology that helps bring meaning and making, and if you know me, I don't take things literally, I don't read things literally, but I take them seriously. And this ancient myth that we have as a part of our tradition, one of the creation stories that we find in our scriptures, really speaks to this power of how we begin with breath. Right? That we begin not with a bunch of rules that are laid out. Like our creation story isn't about rules, but it's about breath. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, we hear these words. Then the Lord God formed the human from the, what's the word? Yeah, it's up there, dust. From the dust, right? From the dust of the ground, and breathed into their nostrils the breath of life. Like our story begins with this understanding of the power and the sacredness of dust, of earth, of flesh, of skin, of breath. The sacred story here doesn't begin with souls that are floating, disembodied, someplace far away. That's not the start. That's not our story. Our sacred story begins with bodies. It begins with bodies that are formed from soil, animated by divine breath. And what this story is telling us is that embodiment, bodies, are not a problem that God is trying to fix. As much as parts of our tradition want it to be that, want this story to be about controlling our bodies and telling our bodies what they can and can't do, this story tells us, no, bodies are the vehicle of the soul. Bodies are good and bodies are formed and bodies connect us and ground us. And embodiment is where our journey with the divine begins. Your body, your presence, your humanity, these things are not obstacles to holiness. No, these are the places where holiness meets us, where the otherness of the divine takes shape and form and touches our feelings and our senses. And yet many of us learn to live as if we are disconnected from our own bodies. Maybe we grew up in a spirituality that wanted to live in this very dualistic worldview that said body bad, spirit good. And so what do? Well, we kind of like rush and we numb and we scroll and we perform and we learn to do everything kind of above the body. Like how can we not worry? How can we actually disconnect ourselves? And so we don't let ourselves experience things in our bodies. Things like grief. Things like joy. Right? Some of us, just the idea of having fun and joy is like, oh, I got to be careful. Careful with that. Careful with that. Can't have fun. Can't be joyful. Can't have good experience. Can't enjoy sex. I'm going to just let that one sit for a second. Right? I mean, I don't know. Like if you grew up in an environment that was like, we don't talk about this stuff. Right? The body, like we just got to control the body. We have to beat the body into submission. But our story begins with the body. Begins with the body being good. But sometimes spirituality, life, our traditions, people around us, things, they form us. And all of a sudden we find ourselves disconnected from truth. disconnected from who we are. Scholar and theologian Barbara Brown Taylor, she writes this book kind of like reimagining and rethinking and talking about sin again. How many of y'all love the word sin? How many of you are like, Ryan, I wish you would preach more on sin, right? And sin gets a bad rap, right? Sin is often, she writes, misunderstood as this moral scorecard. How many of you, like, that's kind of when you hear the word sin, that's what you think of, like moral scorecard. What I did or didn't do that was right or wrong. And when I do something wrong, I've sinned, and it's very active. And when I do this, and I've disappointed God or I've disappointed someone else, right? And she says, listen, that's really a misunderstanding, right? When we think of sin as a list of our failures that just get tallied up, like we're misunderstanding really the beauty and the power of the concept of sin and how it can shape us into betterment, how it can call us into something more beautiful. And she invites us in her work to think about sin differently. And she says, sin too often really is thought of as rule breaking, but at its root, it's disconnection. It's disconnection. Sin is this idea, this space of disconnection from the divine, however we might imagine or think about that. Sin is like this disconnection from one another when we miss one another, when we're harming one another. It can be disconnection from our own bodies and our own desires. It can be the disconnection from the truth of who we are and our lives. And I wonder if this understanding, this way of thinking about sin, right, that it can help us understand why Ash Wednesday or Sunday or Lent, whatever, like why it begins with dust. Because it reminds us and it takes us back to where connection first began, right? The connection of soul and breath and body. And it all began in this like space of earth and dust, in a garden that was filled with curiosity and anxiety and blame and fear and shame. And isn't that our lives? Just earthy, dusty spaces of fear and joy and excitement and anxiety and blame and shame. And ashes kind of bring us back to that moment. One chapter later in Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, in the moments like after the rupture enters the story, the eating of the forbidden fruit, when that takes place, in that moment, part of the story is really amazing. Like this God who is the creator in the story comes down to the garden and is walking around, and God asks the question, where are you? Where are you? Because the created, the beloved ones are hiding. Notice what God doesn't do in the story. God doesn't start with accusation. God doesn't say, why are you hiding? I know why you're hiding. God doesn't start with accusation. God doesn't start with shame in the story. You better hide from me. No. Starts with this question. Where are you? It's a beautiful question for a day like today, because it's a relational question. Why are you not here with me? Where are you? Why are you distant from me? Why are you hiding? And in this space, like it's this question that Lent kind of sets right in front of us. Lent for the next 40 days just kind of asks us this question, like, where are you? And maybe that's a good question for all of us to just hold for a moment. Like if you're a note taker, if you're a fill-it-in person, if you have your phone, like just write that question down, like, where am I? And maybe that's the question we ought to hold through this season of Lent. Like, where am I? Where am I in the relationships of my life? Where am I in the relationships with family? Where am I in the relationship with friends, with coworkers, with myself, with the divine, with my church? Where am I in these relationships? What is my hope for them? Am I hiding somehow inside of these things? Where am I in my own story? And Ash Wednesday is not about pretending everything's fine. Lent is not the season to just assume my life is great. Lent is not a season, Ash Sunday, Ash Wednesday is not about pretending that we're these strong people, that everything is good. It's actually the exact opposite. Lent is a season where we locate ourselves honestly. And we recognize that we're locating ourselves at least here in this faith community, before love. That we recognize I can be honest about where I am, my thoughts, my hopes, my fears, my dreams, my failures, my shortcomings. I can be honest about all that stuff because I'm being honest with it before love. This great mystery that we call God. Pure, radical love that provides the space for the kind of honesty that can transform us, that can call us into ourselves. And it's important that we recognize that because sin, right, at its deepest level, right, this theological idea, sin at its deepest level is not that we've done something wrong. Tally it up. Somebody's got to pay the price. This idea of rights and wrongs and ledgers and the banking model of of spirituality. But it's this idea that in the wounds of our lives, right? The way I talk about sin a lot, the way we talk about sin inside of our Fresh Perspective is this idea of wounds, right? That when I am wounded from sin, when sin wounds, right? When I live in that space of disconnected, right? The idea that when I experience a wound, I'm disconnected from that person or that thing that I experience it from. When I give the wound, I disconnect myself. Does that make sense? No? We can stay here all day. It's an important concept. I want to move from theory to practice. So I want to make sure you understand this, right? So think of it real concretely, right? Just look who's with you. Look at the person who you came with today. If you came with somebody, if you didn't come with somebody, look at whoever looks like the worst person in the room. Why are y'all looking at me? That was just rude. Okay. So listen. Okay. Heavy topic. You got to bring some lightness into it. Little tip of the trade. Think about a time where that person who means something to you, significant meaning to you, said something, neglected, did something, and it wounded you. Did you feel closer to that person in that moment, or did you feel farther away? Embodied feeling, real, true feeling, right? Most of the time, it doesn't draw us together, right? When we get called a name, when we are forgotten about, that doesn't just make, I just feel so loved. It's actually the opposite, right? And in that experience, what do we tend to do? The garden story tells us what we do. We hide. And our disconnection is about hiding because we don't trust love, right? Because our understanding of love can be very fragile, right? And that's why it's important to recognize and to hold this really beautiful understanding. I think one of the most inspired passages in all of our scripture is God is love. Because that provides the sense of security that at least with the divine, I can bear all of who I am. Every wound I have ever experienced, every wound that I have made possible for others to experience. And when we experience that woundedness, when we experience that disconnected, we hide. We hide behind busyness. How many of you get real busy when you just start to feel a little anxious about life and disconnected? You're just like, I got to fix something. I got to get busy. We hide behind distraction, we'll scroll, we hide behind self-protection. These are all the spaces that we hide, and we settle for distance because closeness feels risky. Because to try and come back together, to try and deal with that wound, deal with that hurt, because we question the significance or we question the radical nature of the love that person might have for us. And so we just kind of keep our distance. But the voice of God, right? Those whispers still moves through the garden of our lives, asking this question, where are you? Not to expose you, right? But to find you. It's a question about finding. And so this morning we respond to this question, not just with words like, here I am, but we respond with these embodied practices in our tradition, right? We respond with this way in which we kind of take a disconnected soul from the body and we bring the two back together in these embodied moments. And so today we take ashes and we put that on our skin. Today we'll take a candle and we'll hold it in our hand and we'll light it by flipping a switch on the bottom. Pretending it's a real flame. And we do these things, right? These embodied experiences. And it's important we understand why we do this. Is it just a tradition? Is it just something that we're supposed to do? Heavens no. Like I'm not doing anything because I'm supposed to do it. So why is it that we do that? Well, it's because embodied experiences, they reconnect us. They reconnect us with truth that our minds alone sometimes can't hold. When we try to just hold things in our minds or in our spirit and our soul, like sometimes they disintegrate and we forget who we are, right? If sin, right, our wounds and our shame, that experience pulls us towards disembodiment, right? Disconnection, then practices like ashes and candles, these are small acts of reconnection. It's why every week when we do our blessing, I invite you to raise your arms up. Does something magical happen like with a blessing when you do this? It's not a trick question. No. But what you're doing is you're bringing your body into the moment, a body that is sacred and holy and good and sometimes not performing the way it should, that sometimes brings pain, but it's a part of the whole. And so rituals like this, like ashes, they have this tendency to serve as this beautiful mechanism of reconnection in our lives. And we reconnect with things like, I am fragile. I am finite. I am human. This body is not going to last forever. And it's important that we remember that ashes are not a symbol of shame. They're not a symbol of shame, but a symbol of honesty, right? If we think of ashes, it's like, oh, I'm just telling you, you're dust. It's all you are. You know, from dust you came, to dust you'll return. Out of here. Don't even try to be a good person. You're just dust. No, we miss it. Dust is where love began the story. Dust is where love did the most intimate work, where breath entered lungs. Like dust is a reminder, yes, but dust can easily be the space where hope can quietly begin to take shape. Because in dust, we recognize our need for one another. We recognize our need for love, our need for the divine. Death is our honesty. It's our humility. It's our naming of need. It's our naming of that I can't be self-sufficient, that I am in some ways dust, that I will return to dust. And so I come in that space of honesty. And Lent isn't this season where I then punish my body, right? Like there's fasting involved for a lot of folks in the Lent season. There's like some pillars that people engage in Lent in very intentional ways. So things like fasting and things like giving. So people will be overly generous during this season, right? But it's not about punishing our bodies. That's not what it's about. It's about reconnection. If you're fasting from something, let me just ask you the question, what are you trying to reconnect with? Right? That's why you're fasting. Like fasting isn't about, oh, I'm just going to punish my body. I'm going to not do this. And then hopefully when I pull that slot machine wheel of God will see how serious I am with my fast, and then I'll get the good stuff. You should never engage in a fast until you know what you're trying to reconnect with. Right? Because fasting is this idea of refocusing energy. Right? And it doesn't have to be food, right? If you want to engage in a fast during Lent, like some of us maybe should just like engage in a fast of gossiping. Some of us should engage in a fast of poor self-talk. Stop beating ourselves up for at least 40 days. Some of us should, you might find something you want to fast, but you have to say, well, what am I trying to reconnect with in this fast, in this giving up? Willful giving up is because I want to take that energy and focus it on this reconnection that I want to take place in my life. And it's important to remember that when we talk about this other big word that oftentimes is attached to sin, and that is salvation, right? That salvation then is not an escape from our humanity. It's not an escape from the world, but it is the connection of our humanity to divine love. right? That's the beauty of faith, is just this faith of a mustard seed, to just believe just a little bit that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are held and loved and of infinite value, and that none of those things that I just said have anything to do with anything you have ever done and ever will do. It is just a statement of fact and reality. You never were separated from God. You never have been disconnected. It's just a lie. It's a lie that's very easy to believe in. And so salvation is this saving from that lie of separation. And we see this in Jesus. We see in Jesus the divine love, right? Divine love doesn't just stand off at this distance, diagnosing what's broken in us. What's the beauty of the story of Jesus as it connects to Lent and goes back to Christmas? Is that the universal Christ, this living divine reality that is this great mystery, our tradition says, took on flesh, took on dust, was formed out of the dust. The story tells us that love enters it, that love meets us in the dust. But it doesn't end with the ashes, right? Because Jesus came and he spoke words and he produced actions of hope. And this series that we're in is going to explore some of those encounters that Jesus had with real people and what they offer us and how they show us how hope can take shape in our lives through these encounters with Jesus, through these encounters with love. And so Jesus, he speaks words that move people forward. And one of the things that Jesus said that we get recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said this. He looks at this group of folks that are following him, that are trying to live their best lives, that are trying to just be a force for good in this world that feels and felt like it was just against them. And Jesus looks and says, "You are the light of the world." He goes on and says, "No one lights a lamp and hides it." Right? Do you see that movement, right? Genesis reminds us that we're dust. This is where we come from. This is important, that you are a body. Your body is sacred. Your body is a gift. It's not perfect. Genesis reminds us of that. Answers the big existential question. The folks who wrote Genesis are answering this big existential question. Why does the body not last, right? That's part of why that story is there. But Genesis kind of reminds us this. It reminds us that love seeks us when we hide, right? And Jesus comes and says, don't hide, shine. Don't hide the light, you shine. So Jesus reminds us that we're meant to shine together. And where is it that you and I can shine? Who is it that you can shine for? And so during this Lent season, I want to bring you to that question. As dust that's been formed into a body that's not meant to hide, but as Jesus would say, is meant to shine, like, where can the love of God shine through you this Lent season? Who is it in your life that could use hope? Not an invitation to Easter service, okay? I mean, by all means, feel free to do that. But if all you think this is about is inviting someone to Easter service, like, we have failed miserably, I have failed miserably in forming you as mature spiritual beings, okay? That might be a part of the process, and that's fine. But I'm going to tell you right now, like, your kitchen table is a far more important location for hope than the communion table for a lot of people. And I just kind of have this belief that we shouldn't be inviting people to church until we've invited them into our lives. So who is that in your life? Where is there a space that you feel a hint of darkness, that your presence could bring light? And so today, not only are we going to receive ashes, but we're going to give you the opportunity to light a candle on the sides of the room as just a symbol of that one person. And you hold that person in that space. And guess what? Maybe the candle you're lighting, maybe the person who needs hope that you're holding is you. And that's okay. And maybe your prayer is that divine love would somehow send a person of light into your world these 40 days. And that's beautiful and wonderful. And remember, being light isn't about being in control, telling someone what to do, how to experience life better, stop doing this, start doing that. Please don't do that. It's just about presence. It's about presence. That's what light is, right? Light doesn't overwhelm the space. When light overwhelms the space, it's called a fire. Right? But when light is just present in the room, illuminating, you don't think about it until it's gone. And so it's just about presence. It's about holding hope in this visible form in this space. And so turning one of these candles on today is just this small embodied way of saying to someone, love is still here. Love is still here. Hope is still possible. Connection is still alive. Because here's what this whole series is about, really. Hope takes shape when love is visible. When love becomes visible in a person's life, hope can begin to form. So in just a few moments, you're going to be invited, for those of you that are able to come forward to receive ashes. If you're not able to come forward, one of our folks who are imposing ashes will come and simply ask you if you would like that. You're welcome to say no, by the way. And when you come forward, when you feel ready to do this, just take some breaths. And if there's one moment in your week where I'd love to just encourage you to just pause, it's right now. If there's one moment when you think about the spiritual life that you hold, that you just try and slow down a little bit in this space. And not go through some motion of having a cross imposed on your forehead or your hand, but just what is it bringing to you? It's a reminder of presence, that it's in the dust. It's in the dust that you were formed. It's in the dust that love breathes breath into you. Dust is a reminder of your weakness, and the Apostle Paul says, guess what? It's in our weakness that we are made strong. The gospel turns it all on its head. It's only in your humility, it's only in the recognition of our dustiness that we can shine with the love and the hope of Jesus. Here's what's interesting. We're going to sing a song that we sing around Christmas time. We've sung a little bit. It's called, "O Come All You Unfaithful." That one resonates a little more with me than "Come All You Faithful." It's like, well, that's like a small list, you know. It's Jesus. He gets to come forward. Everybody else has to stay away. But "O Come All You Unfaithful," like this song just reminds us of just the truth of who we are. Just embodied souls trying to navigate this space. We're spiritual realities having a fleshly experience. And so ashes aren't about shame or guilt or judgment in that space. No, ashes are about honesty, honestly understanding our limitations, our wounds. And so this reminder of the Christmas story is important because it's all intertwined. Jesus is born of dust and takes on flesh. And this birth of the living Christ brings hope to us into our lives. And that's what Christmas is all about. Peace on earth, this announcement. But as we travel through, life still happens. Yes, peace on earth, we're working towards that, but life still happens. Death still happens. But resurrection does too. And so the liturgical year and these things are important because they can help us reconnect all of that truth, all of that reality, all of that complex messiness of life. And so during this song, you're invited to embody these two experiences. First, to come and receive the imposition of ashes, pause in silence, let the words that are spoken in that moment just kind of wash over you. The people who are here to impose ashes, they're going to say, "From dust you came, and to dust you will return." May this mark remind you that when people meet Jesus, hope takes shape. Just be in that space for a moment. And then I would encourage you to just slowly and methodically, thinking about your breath, walk to a candle, turn a candle on for that person in your life, and it could be you, that might need an experience of love and hope. And so there's no rush, there's no pressure in this moment. Just come as you are, come as you're ready. Here's the thing, like, this isn't about proving anything to anybody, right? But this morning, these embodied practices are really about allowing reconnection to take place, to reconnect us with this truth that we belong to this great mystery called God, every person on the planet, everything on the planet. We belong to one another, and we belong to hope itself. And so as you come forward, keep this in mind. You were formed from dust, and God's breath still breathes within you. May feel like that breath is a little weaker than it was 40 or 50 years ago, but it still breathes within you. And even when you think you're hiding, even when you feel like you're hiding, God is still asking, where are you? And as you light a candle, remember the words of Jesus, you are the light of the world. Don't hide it. And ultimately, remember this, hope takes shape, not in perfection. You don't have to show it perfectly, but in presence. Hope takes shape in our presence when we fill the space with love. So I'm going to invite you to stand if you're able to right now. We have folks that are imposing ashes all over this space. So there's 2 in the back. There's 2 up here. For those who need ASL interpretation, we have one of our interpreters alongside as well. The invitation is for those of you who know you're not faithful, who know that that is a pipe dream. You can never be faithful, but you can come and you can experience the hope that's found in a divine love that breathes life into you. So in this moment, breathe, rest, and understand honesty and humility is where hope begins.